Oh, well, thank you, Dr. Gentry, for giving me the opportunity to speak, and to the board and to the public. It is amazing that it was 25 years ago on this day, March 26th, that I committed to a life of service and the values of manhood, scholarship, perseverance, and uplift at Lincoln University. As my time in Nashville begins to wind down, I hope that our children, our employees, and our communities have witnessed these traits manifested in every public and private interaction that I've had with you. It's important for our kids to see adults who work from a value system, and it's really been both my joy and honor to serve you. Today I want to take a brief moment to publicly address a few issues that have come up that we just think need to be addressed, and it has saddened me a bit to see some calculated, relentless attempts to just look at the work that has been done. But I would say, as a believer, we understand that the devil seeks to attack those who genuinely work hard to build God's kingdom as he would want it to be built up, particularly with underprivileged people, with voiceless people, and those who've had it kind of hard, being at the forefront of our mind and our work. So, when we see behaviors which have resulted in my desire not to request a contract extension or stay in Metro Nashville Public Schools past June 2020, it could be summed up in the teachings of the Arbinger Institute. And when the board and I started on this journey a few years back, the majority of the board and our leadership team attended a training to avoid getting into this kind of place that we're in. And the training taught us the following. So let's say that I was working with Dr. Gentry here, and I came across some information that would be very helpful to Dr. Gentry to do her work. If I'm seeing Dr. Gentry as a person, what might I do? All right, we share that information. Good. This is a call and response, so you can feel free to just come on in. Right. You'd share the information, right? Absolutely. See, sharing the information, you have a choice. And that choice is important because you have an opportunity to honor that choice or not. If you choose not to honor that choice, that's what we call betraying ourselves. And we get into the situation of betrayal. And let's think about what happens when we betray the choice to do the right thing. Well, what happens is, how do you suppose I might have seen Dr. Gentry? Well, I might think she's lazy or incompetent or a threat or a burden, and there's no real reason to give her that information. And how do you suppose I would see myself? Well, I'd see myself as I must be busy, hardworking, too helpful, and not an enabler. Do any of these thoughts that I'm thinking invite me to go back and do something differently for Dr. Gentry? No, they don't. What do they do for me? They justify me not doing right. All right. So when I betray myself in the sense of doing the right thing, I have a need. And that need is to be justified. And you see, it's this need to be justified, this need to prove that we're right, that gets us in trouble. And it's that need, I think, that has affected the board and administration's ability to focus on our children, because that's what we should be doing, is focusing on children. And we all have a role to play in the problem, so I don't absolve myself from the role. We're all in it, and we all have a role to play in the solution. So we're in this place because we have some members that have forgotten the history of where we started as a district, and we have a biased, unnamed news station that continues to try to justify behaviors in the name of accountability. So one criticism that has continuously come up has been around culture. And in my very first interview on May 5th, 2016, I actually had an opportunity to ask the board what was one of the most pressing issues for me to focus on if I were to be selected as our next director. And Ms. Spearing shared the following. She said that teachers have lived in a culture of fear in Metro Nashville Public Schools for about 10 years. And some people say that this is not true, but we all hear it all the time. When I go out, I hear it from principals, I hear it from teachers. We haven't been able to grapple with it in a way that we can recognize it. And that was at 1 hour, 13 minutes, and 4 seconds into that interview. If anybody wants to fact check that one. And then at 1 hour and 15 minutes and 50 seconds into the interview, Ms. Frog shared, changing the culture here for teachers and for everyone that works in the schools, because I think if you can create a culture of support coupled with high expectations, it will change things. Someone that can bring healing to the district that would be a servant leader. I think you understand from the quote that you have on your resume, and the quote that I had on my resume was a quote from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and it was from his speech, The Drum Major's Instinct, and I'll come back to that at the end of this talk. But I do want to talk about some of the other specific criticisms that have come up. The main issues have been my license being flagged by the state, how we have handled sexual harassments, how we've spent taxpayer dollars, and our human resources audit. Now, since the media has refused to delve deeply and thoughtfully into any of these issues, I'll take executive privilege to address each one of these areas. All right, so first, I take seriously any failure to report suspensions, dismissals, or resignations of MMPS employees that would warrant consideration for license suspensions or revocation under the state board rules. 12 such instances were identified during the 2017-2018 school year and the 2018-2019 school years. In our review, we found 10 of these matters that were mishandled by an employee in MMPS Human Resources Office who was offered the option to resign from our school district. Of those matters, we further found evidence that I had signed paperwork for the purpose of making reports to the state, but those reports were not submitted by the former employee who is no longer with us. I regret that these matters were mishandled, and I want the state board to know that we have taken corrective action. Secondly, I've identified structural deficiencies relative to how MMPS has historically handled or in some cases mishandled these situations. As you know, many large school systems have developed in-house legal capacity to ensure compliance with state and federal rules and regulations. For example, our friends in Shelby County Schools has a general counsel and a chief legal officer overseeing a team of more than a half-dozen attorneys in the district's central office, in addition to legal support the district receives from Shelby County's attorney. While Shelby County is larger than Metro Nashville Public Schools, we are the second largest district in Tennessee with nearly 11,000 employees, and I believe we could benefit from a similar but smaller in-house legal structure. Our attorneys at the Metro Department of Law concur that developing additional legal capacity is critical to ensuring future compliance, and they are reviewing the Metro Charter to determine the best path for doing so. Meanwhile, I have proceeded to hire an attorney on staff who is specifically detailed to the MMPS Human Resources Office to help us avoid situations like this on an ongoing basis. Finally, in discussing this matter with attorneys, my understanding is that MMPS is not the only school district in Tennessee to fail to report suspensions, dismissals, or resignations of employees that would warrant consideration for license suspension or revocation under state board rules. In the spirit of collective improvement, I stand ready to share our experiences and corrective actions with other districts, and I have respectively requested that the state board extend the same professional collaboration and courtesy to Metro Nashville schools that is given to other superintendents and districts around the state. In a district with over 11,000 employees, for the director of schools to potentially receive such a consequence is a bit extreme. This is an issue that the Tennessee Organization of School Superintendents should take up, because I believe the intent of the law is to make sure that school districts are doing the right thing. The intent is not to destroy the livelihood of directors of schools who are unable or unaware of the underperformance and underreporting of employees. I do not believe that the intent of the law is for the director of schools to become a human resources official. The employees who sent the forms reported to 2 employees under me, and it's unrealistic for the head of an organization as large as ours to know that individuals have not done their work, particularly when our legal team and others followed up and directed individuals to do their work properly. Once I was aware of the issue, swift action was taken, and we strengthened our processes. I'm working with the state to address this issue, and I'm confident that reason will prevail. So as we move on into sexual harassment, it's clear to communicate that I do not tolerate sexual harassment at all. We have strong school system policies, and it is my expectation that all employees follow our policies. Since the issues have arisen, we have taken 5 concrete actions. First, we've strengthened our systems to improve the handling of harassment issues in the district. The employee relations team and other human resources staff work to establish consistent processes, procedures, and training sessions in the central office and schools, as well as a school system of checks and balances to ensure the processes are being implemented and are working. Secondly, we've increased our training. In the second half of 2018, the Executive Officer for Human Resources for Talent Strategy, in partnership with Metro Legal and input from principals and other leaders, developed a robust investigative training program entitled Investigation Processes and Legal Responsibilities. A total of 6 sessions were held this past January, and we had 283 leaders attend. Additional sessions are being held in early April for those principals and central office leaders who were unable to make the January session, and mid-level leaders will also be invited. The trainings iterate information that leaders have seen previously, but also introduces new information and improved tools for leaders to use. Leaders have been given documented processes, procedures, laws, policies, forms, and templates, and reporting requirements. Leaders' obligations to create a safe environment are also emphasized. The training also addresses the importance of clear, concise, signed and dated documented investigation notes. Note that the employee relations team is also working on developing an online harassment and discrimination session for all employees, which is slated to be implemented early in 2019-2020. Third, we created a hotline. So we sent an email to all employees to inform them of a structure in place for employees to report concerns confidentially. We encouraged employees to use the confidential hotline or reach out directly to the employee relations team. Fourth, we are adding personnel, so to improve the turnaround on investigations, the administration's 2020 budget proposal seeks to add another 0.5 FTE to the HR budget for the employee relations team. And finally, we have increased our dialogue to strengthen empowerment. I and others are engaged with staff through voice sessions at the quadrant and district level, as well as various teacher and parent groups. These conversations offer opportunities for staff and parents to share concerns and generate solutions. Some participants have followed up with questions, and we have worked to respond quickly, and we work quickly to address their concerns. And many of the items that were underway prior to the report, but we'll be sure to follow up on all of them. Next, let's talk about contracts. So let me start by saying that I spend much less than my predecessor did on contractual services. The difference is I did cut ineffective contracts of friends of certain board members at the beginning of my tenure, and I have dealt with one board member who's been angry since October of 2016. You know, any board would understand that a CEO who has a track record of success in getting results will bring with him or her knowledge of services that have been successful. To try to make the argument that because I've worked with the company in an ethical and professional way in an environment that had better results than we have, and to try to paint those actions as illegal or unethical is just insulting. All business actions that have been conducted under my leadership have been ethical. A longtime procurement official unknowingly made mistakes, and corrective action was taken to follow a thorough review of all contracts by Metro Legal. It's unfortunate that Metro Legal did not catch the error when signing off on the contract, and then once again failed to flag the issue when the contract was brought to the board floor for our approval. I am a director of schools. I'm not an attorney, nor am I a procurement expert. It's my job to correct issues when they arise, and I've done so by requiring our procurement team to be retrained, working with Metro Legal to ensure that their signature actually means that we're following the law, and disciplining the individuals responsible for those errors. Over the course of the past 2.5 years, I've pushed this organization with a sense of urgency, and I don't apologize for that. This school system did not have the urgency that was needed to get the results we sought, namely being the fastest improving urban district in America. If there was a mistake that I made, it was that I pushed too hard with too little resources, and as a result, people made errors. The errors were not intentional or willful, as our audit communicated. They were just errors. And as long as the errors were not unethical or immoral, we treated our employees fairly as we disciplined them. Moving into the human resources audit, as you may recall, I requested that the board audit our human resources department, and I was appreciative that the board agreed. My intent was to know if there were any errors in how we handled sexual harassment investigations. The audit did not find errors in the conclusions that were drawn, but it did find that processes could be strengthened and that processes had been broken for years. Due to a lack of confidentiality of board members to date, my team has still not met with the law firm to understand how they came up with their conclusions. It's unreasonable for anyone to expect me to follow all of the audit's recommendations if we've not had the opportunity to sit down and understand the methodology that was used to draw conclusions. As a qualitative researcher, I've been trained not to accept generalizations without understanding the processes used, particularly when you're talking about qualitative work. Processes in these types of reports is critical in determining which recommendations are valid and which recommendations may not have enough credible information to be validated. Once the board provides me with guidance on how we can best engage with the legal firm that conducted that report, I can give an update. The action plan that was created was a start to what will be a multi-year process to support a department that has been woefully undersupported and woefully underfunded prior to my arrival. So I will conclude by saying that it has truly been my honor to serve you as your director of schools. I've worked with a sense of urgency and with an equity agenda. And as a result of the great work of our employees, that equity agenda has shown great results, including we looked at Title I funds and we put more dollars in our poorest schools because they needed the resources to be able to have an opportunity to do something. We have placed a significant emphasis on literacy, and we work with the mayor's office and dozens of nonprofits to create the Blueprint for Early Childhood Success, which is an action plan for doubling the number of students reading on grade level by 2025. We successfully achieved year one benchmarks in reading, and we also made sure every school had a qualified literacy coach. We're proud that once again this year we haven't presented officially our MAP results, but when they come out, they'll show that once again for the second year in a row, every student group in every grade tested grew faster than the nation this year. In math, every student group in every grade level, with the exception of fifth grade math, grew faster than the nation. We doubled the number of students taking advanced placement courses in high school and nearly doubled the amount of students taking college entrance exams and industry certification exams. We saw improvement in the pass rates of students who took industry certification exams was jumped from 59% to 61%, and the number of students taking the exam increased by 70% over the previous year. Average ACT scores increased from an 18.7 to an 18.9 with more students taking the exam, and in addition, more students are earning a 21 on the ACT than ever before. We've ensured that all students in our elementary and middle schools have access to gifted and talented services by creating the advanced academic resource teacher position and ensuring all schools have at least a part-time person serving students. And 2 years ago, we were able to secure a 3% raise and a step for the hardworking employees. While we were not fully funded last year and we had to cut $15 million from our budget, this year we've asked for an increase, and we've also asked for an additional increase for our bus drivers and our bus attendants. We've secured $24 million in federal dollars to support the creation of 5 elementary magnet schools to provide more social and emotional support to pre-K students, as well as professional development for arts-related educators. And we also received a little bit over $13 million in our Gear Up grant. We developed a strategic plan for the district with clear accountability measures and a new evaluation tool that has been clearly communicated as one of the most rigorous in the country if used effectively, if not weaponized, but if used to just tell how we're doing and then giving us an opportunity to shift resources or shift strategy to focus on what we need to focus on. We reduced suspensions by 1,782 infractions, and the greatest headway has been made for African American males who are being suspended at disproportionate rates. We established a science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics focus for 18 middle schools to ensure that coding was offered in those schools, and we reduced the technology ratio with more targeted professional development for teachers in those schools. We increased funding for special education and English language learners by $7.2 million last year, while we cut $15 million from our budget. And we established an early college program for grades 9 through 12. We had a middle college, 10-12, but the expectations weren't clear. So we started in 9th grade with the expectation that every student that's there will graduate with an associate's degree and their high school diploma in 4 years, and it will be at no cost to families. Yeah. So, it is clear to me that we have been focusing on the adults recently, and I signed up to focus on our kids. So as a result, I'm not interested in a contract extension, so I'm formally requesting that this board evoke the section of my contract that allows for us to have a mutual conversation to figure out how to best transition. It is my hope that my time in Nashville has inspired our community to become more united and more active in supporting public education. Because I still believe that Nashville has all of the ingredients that are needed to continue to move the needle for children. There has been much said recently about the perception of my poor treatment, and I do want to remind our community that this is not a time to point fingers or to blame people. It's a time for action, and it's a time for you to remember your civic duty to vote. For those who still have a hard time with how this looks and what it will do to our community as we move forward, all I can do in my heart is to remind you of Dr. King's recollection of the power of someone understanding who you serve, as he shared in his sermon titled The Drum Major's Instinct. You see, it's the story of a man who just served. He was born in an obscure village, and he was born the child of a poor peasant woman. And then he grew up still in another obscure village where he worked as a carpenter until he was about 30 years old. Then for 3 years, he just got on his feet, and he was an itinerant preacher. He went about doing some good things. He didn't have much. He never wrote a book. He didn't have a PhD. He didn't hold an office. He didn't have a family. He didn't have a house. Like I said, he didn't even go to college. He never visited a big city. He never actually went anywhere 200 miles past where he grew up. He did none of the usual things that the world would associate with greatness. He had no credentials but himself. He was only 33 years old when the tide of public opinion turned against him. They called him a rabble-rouser. They called him a troublemaker. They said he was an agitator. He practiced civil disobedience, and he broke injunctions. And so he was turned over to his enemies and went through the mockery of a trial. And the irony of all of this is that his friends turned him over. Right. One of his closest friends actually denied him. Another friend turned him over to his enemies, and while he was dying, the people who killed him gambled for his clothes, the only possessions that he had in the world. And when he was dead, he was buried in a borrowed tomb through the pity of a friend. 20 centuries have come and gone, and today he still stands as the most influential figure that has ever lived in human history. All of the armies that ever marched, all of the navies that ever sailed, all of the parliaments that ever sat, all of the kings that ever reigned put together have not yet affected the life of man on this earth as much as this one solitary life. Now, his name may be familiar to you, but today we can hear them talking about him. Every now and then somebody says he's the King of Kings, and you hear some people saying that he's the Lord of Lords, and somewhere else you hear people saying in Christ there is no east or west, and then they go on and talk about him there is no north or south, but one great fellowship of love throughout the whole wide world. And he didn't have anything. He just went around doing a bunch of good. So I remind us of this, I remind us of this story today because when you commit to serving, everything just finds a way to work out. And I'm confident that we'll continue to be fine, and I pray that this school system continues to be fine. You all know that I like listening to rap songs, so I'll go ahead and leave you with the great rapper and philosopher Tupac Shakur. And what I'll say to that is, I ain't mad at you. In due time, everybody tends to get what they deserve. So at this time, Dr. Gentry, I'm going to ask to just step out and speak with the media, and with your permission, I'll end for tonight. Thank you.